really exciting time in business and governments today with respect to how information is being used and consumed. Everyone's talking about big data. The other day I heard it, I've heard people in my family talking about big data. I've heard people on TV talking about big data. I hear, we get requests of CEOs in major corporations asking about big data and Hadoop, right, an open source technology. It's amazing how big data has become the new kind of buzzword. But what's interesting is really what's behind that. And really it's, I think, a need for people to feel more control and more power of what's really going on. How can they improve their businesses and their agencies? And so when we're looking at big data, one of the things we like to do is just step back and say, well, what's really different from the past and what's really evolved? And when we think about it, there are those two basic problems of how do you manage information and how do you use it? And when we think about managing information, it's this explosion of the unstructured content, the information that really is not easily digested by traditional analytics. On the front end side, though, on how do you use that information, it's really about how do you create context and meaning around a particular decision. How do, things that we would normally do in our own minds as human judgment, how do you embed that into a process or into a system? And so blending those two things together really create a whole new realm of opportunity around big data. We really look at information solutions in two different categories. How do we help our clients manage the information that they need? And then also, how do they exploit that information? How do they get value out of it? And I think historically you can really point to a couple of key areas of technology that have been really significant in cost savings. So on managing information, data integration and data quality have just resulted in a significant amount of savings. So if you think about the downstream cost of poor data quality, the reports, the dashboards that are built off of poor data, and then all of the manual exercises that go to reconcile data, the catching and the cleaning of that data up front through integrated data integration routines and data quality routines are just foundational to lowering cost. On the exploitation of information and the use of information, this is where techniques like data visualization and mashups have become really prevalent. So enabling a self-service BI environment, business intelligence environment, where people can get the information that they want and have a conversation with the data, we like to say, where you're not going to IT to ask for a new report, but instead you're able to have a conversation and interact with the information in your own way. It results in a huge amount of savings on the front end. When I think about best practices as kind of an old consultant, I can't help but just bring that all the way back to what methods do you have, what approaches do you have, and then also what kind of organization structure do you have in place to really build these kinds of solutions. So I think the biggest impact that I've seen in the recent 18 months or so is the adoption of competency centers and centers of excellence as ways to really collaborate around information and share. Because what's happening is as users get more access to information, they're finding that they just have more questions. And so having a network of individuals who know the data, know how to manipulate the data, use the data, and use that as a center of excellence so that folks aren't trying to figure it out on the fly themselves is really powerful. So, and we're seeing that those competency centers are emerging into more agile innovation centers where, teaming between business and IT, looking at, how can we look at bringing this new data source in kind of a proof of concept mode. So that kind of a best practice in an area that's changing so rapidly with all of these new information sources that are available now is really becoming a best practice of, how do you design an organization? There's some really exciting areas of what's changing in the use and management of information. The technologies that are showing up now in the market from some of the boutique providers and the large companies are the types of things I've never even seen before. I'm an old mathematician. I know how to analyze structured data, applying math algorithms. But a lot of the techniques that are coming out now and the technologies, like in HP has a software called Autonomy, which has a whole set of capabilities around how you mine unstructured content. And again, as a mathematician, I'm used to analyzing, rows and columns of databases. But what I'm learning and evolving in is this unstructured content is just full of gems. It's full of, what it does is it mines anything that a human brain would view, read, or listen to. So think of audio files on a voicemail, or think of text records in a call center, or think of what you type on TripAdvisor about your trip to Key West, right? Those are all content that need to be analyzed just as much as those records in the database. So what we're really focused on is that blending of those two types of data, and how do you analyze that? And the technologies that we're doing with autonomy are just absolutely mind-blowing.